What's up, fight fans? It's your boy Terrio, Boxed Out Forum, and I'm back at y'all with another one, reporting live from the sunny island of Mauritius, off the Indian Ocean, but where I'm vacating for right now. But even though I'm vacating, I'm still going to report some boxing news because it's boxing around the world, ending the year 2021. We ended last night actually, 2 nights ago, with a heavyweight fight in London between Derek Chisora and Joseph Parker. As we know, Joseph Parker is fighting this rematch with Derek Chisora, which ended in Joseph Parker winning by unanimous decision. If you haven't seen that fight and you're a boxing fan, I would suggest you watch that fight because it was entertaining. It's worth a watch. It was a bit hard to watch at times because you saw an insanely brave Derek Chisora fight 12 rounds, and he looked like he was out on his feet a few times, got dropped a couple times in that fight, and somehow managed to see the 12th round. But that's not all I'm going to talk to you about today, because I think besides the call being the right call, meaning Derek Chisora lost and Joseph Parker rightfully won that fight, the thing that actually bothers me about that particular fight was the scorecards. The three judges had it insanely close. In fact, criminally close. It was criminal how close they had it. And they had it where Joseph Parker won by a very narrow margin. Now, like I said, before you jump all over the comment section, I suggest you watch that fight. And no matter what you think of Derek Chisora, and no matter what you think of Joseph Parker, and even no matter what you think of this particular video, you need to watch that fight to have your own opinion. And maybe you'll get to see what I'm about to talk about right now. Now, to me, the fights, the judges' scorecards, in no way was that fight close, right? One judge had it 114. I'm reading it now so I don't misquote anybody. One judge had it 114 and 112. Another judge had it 115 and 110. Another judge had it 115 and 111. Now, if you looked at that, if you listened to those scorecards, or if you just read those scorecards, you would think Joseph Parker narrowly won that fight, because that's what that particular those cards suggest. It suggests that the other fighter who lost was in the game. He was in with a shout. Let me tell you, at best, Derek Chisora probably won 2 rounds at best. All right. Yes, he was brave. Yes, he was courageous. Yes, he put on a hell of a performance, getting off the canvas I think it was 2 times, maybe 3. One, judge rules as a slip, but it's actually, I had it as a punch that's more like a backhand, but that punch caused him to go down with his glove first. So it wasn't really a slip. Anyway, he hit the canvas 3 times. And on the 2 times that he came off the canvas, i.e. Derek Chisora, he was wobbling, staggering, looked completely out of it. It's just that he's so tough, as he always is. And Joseph Parker just couldn't put him out of there. Hit him with some big, brutal shots all night. I'll quote what a Sports Illustrated journalist wrote, Chris Mannix. He wrote that on social media after the fight, the scorecards were criminally bad, in one phrase. And another phrase, he said, investigation worry scorecards. Because although the fight was in London, how those 3 judges saw that fight as being close, it deserves the sport to be looked at. And 2021 was a very difficult year for the sport of boxing. As you know, we were in COVID, we were in lockdown for at least 4 or 5 months of that year. In some countries, there were no live shows in the sense where crowds were allowed to participate. Fighters were fighting behind closed doors. And as you know, in most sporting events, not just boxing, you need the crowd. So it's hard to pay for a fight or buy into a fight when there's no audience allowed in the particular stadium. Yet some fights went ahead. Some marquee fights went ahead behind closed doors. Crawford and Kell Brook, Yardy versus Arthur, fight number 1, that was behind closed doors, just to name a few fights. And there were a number of fights that were held behind closed doors. And that just shows you how the sport tried to move on, even in the era of COVID. And then even post-COVID lockdown restrictions, where we were allowed to have live shows, i.e. Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, the trilogy fight, the third fight, and so on and so on. And this last fight between Joseph Parker and Derek Chisora, and a number of different fights, Sean Porter, Terence Crawford, the list goes on and on and on. We have a situation where, you know, we're not out of this COVID situation. I mean, we could also go back into another lockdown, God forbid, here in London especially, or in London. But boxing is boxing. The judges still have to score these fights, and we still need to call the fights as we see them, whether they are in our favor or not. And a judge is supposed to be impartial regardless of who's fighting. So when you read Chris Mannix saying it's investigation worry bad, I agree with it. It was bad. Under no circumstances. That should have easily been like maybe a 117, I would say 117, 109, or 116, 110, or 117, 109, or at best 117, 111. There was no way that fight was 114, 112 based on one judge's scorecard. That judge needs to get his head checked. And the other two, 115, 110, 115, 111, I believe was the other one I just said. So that's the problem we have with the sport of boxing, that we've had a year in 2021 where there's been some really, really bad scorecards. There's been some really bad decisions in the sport of boxing. I don't really have a problem with a judge calling a fight too early if he feels that the fighter is in trouble. And the fighters always say, most of them will say, man, I was in the game. I was conscious. I was getting the spark knocked out of me and all that kind of stuff, because they're fighters. And at the end of the day, sometimes you will see fighters argue tooth and nail that the fight will stop too early. Just look at Deontay Wilder when he fought Tyson Fury in the second fight. He argued with his trainers for dear life that they should never let him go out in his gum shield. Well, that's exactly what happened in the third fight. So he went out how he was supposed to, or how he wanted to. Look at my previous video when I stated that maybe Deontay Wilder will retire. That's one of the things he's intimated in one of his previous interviews. Now, back to this fight. In terms of the Derek Chisora fight, what does it mean for Joseph Parker or Derek Chisora? Well, Joseph Parker, after the fight, stated, I wish that Derek Chisora retires after this fight, because he took a beating. He took a really bad beating in this fight. And at 37 years old, you're not a spring chicken in this sport, and there's no really great retirement plan for boxers when they retire. So I personally would like to see Derek Chisora retire, but maybe he has other ideas. Maybe he wants another big payday. I'm sure he did very well off this fight. He made another handsome payday. I counted the last 8 fights Derek Chisora has lost straight. I could be wrong. Maybe it's 7. But it's definitely north of 6. And in each fight, he's been through some grueling fights. Dillian White, like I said, Joseph Parker, he fought twice now. You can only take beatings like that for so long without it having damaging effects in the long run. Yes, he's an incredibly brave man. He's one of the toughest heavyweights I've ever seen. But you know, he's had over 45 fights. And when you've had 45 fights, that means you've had 45 training camps. You've had over 45 fights worth of sparring partners. All of those things, training regime, dietitians, nutritionists, and so on and so forth. All of the training regimes, all of these things takes its toll on the human body. And then to get yourself in shape, to get your brains knocked around for 12 rounds, or 10 rounds, or whatever it may be, it's a lot. And at some point, you got to say, I've got enough money, hopefully. I made enough money out of sport. I can be smart, put my money aside, and live the rest of my days, maybe get involved in sport or boxing. I believe he has his hand in a boxing gym somewhere in North London. He's boxers like Derek Chisora will always be in and around boxing. So if he's been smart with his money, he'll be fine. But to continue to box at this level, and he is boxing at the highest level against marquee fighters, is a bit of a danger and a bit of a worry for me to see fighters continuously put themselves through this. And, you know, maybe he'll look back at it with his coaching staff and think, oh, well, the judges' scorecard was pretty generous. Maybe I wasn't that bad out of it. He couldn't get me out of there. So I'm a match for anybody. Someone texted me earlier today and said that the ultimate gatekeeper is Derek Chisora. Well, that's not something Derek Chisora needs to see, because then he may read that and think, maybe that is right. I got 2 or 3 more fights left in me. But he has some names out there that he could fight. He could potentially fight Andrew Reese Jr. He could potentially fight maybe Deontay Wilder, if Deontay Wilder wants another tune-up fight before he decides what he really wants to do. There are some names out there. There are some names out there that Derek Chisora could potentially jump in the ring with, make him another meal here, meal there, and stash that money aside if he wants to go through it, because he's a tough match for anybody, that's for sure. But like I said, the judges' scorecards did that fight no favors. It didn't do anybody any favors. In fact, it did a big disservice to Joseph Parker, because he completely smashed that man to bits for 12 rounds. Now, let's look on the bright side. What does it mean for Joseph Parker? Well, Eddie Hearns has basically said that a potential fight with Filip Ergovic of Croatia, the big hit in Croatian, is for IBF Eliminator, is a possible fight that Joseph Parker could possibly have. Ergovic just came up with another knockout win. And he's not as fast and skillful and flashy as Parker used to be. In fact, I think Parker's gotten a little bit slower. He came in his last fight against Derek Chisora heaviest than he's ever been. But maybe he believes that by becoming in bigger and stronger, he can pack more power in his punches. He didn't look in the greatest shape, to be honest, against Derek Chisora. Chisora did look like he was fighting back in a few of those rounds, but at no point did Joseph Parker look like he was in trouble to me. But he's revitalized his career in the sport of boxing. He's had over 30 fights. I think he's 30-2 now, or 31-2. And he's still fresh. He's still a young 29-year-old. So he easily has another 3-4 years left in him, depending on how long he wants to fight. He has some good fights left in him. Not sure if he'll become a world champion again unless someone vacates the belt, in my opinion. I don't think he's on the level of say Alexander Usyk. However, in terms of what it means for Joseph Parker, I believe it looks brighter for him than it does for Derek Chisora. I think Derek Chisora should retire. But like I said in the end of this video, as I said in the beginning, the judges' scorecard was horrendous, terrible, horrible, in fact. That's all I got for y'all for right now. You tell what you think. Support the channel, hit the bell icon, and leave your comments below. And I'm out of here for right now, and I'll be back with another one. Holla back. Peace out.